become and they will
Never surrender.
on a Saturday night.
Der Eisendrache had a hidden story that we've never seen all this time. We are once again diving into the late Black Ops 3 development documents and files, and have stumbled upon some super interesting information that reframes our understanding of that zombies experience. The map that many regard as the fan favourite, the pinnacle of streamlined COD zombies, doing almost everything right. Story, gameplay, narrative, Easter eggs, it's all there. The amount of deep story stuff that is still technically present in the game that none of us ever interpreted has actually blown my mind. I thought long ago I'd learned nearly everything there was to know about the most popular piece of the Ether story, and yet time and time again I'm surprised by these files that have surfaced. It's reignited an interest in this era of zombies for me, and I hope that it has for you as well. I get the opportunity to keep digging deeper and finding more. This is a rare case where I think the leaks are actually adding so much more depth to the story of the game, allowing us to peel back layers and discover things that we would never put together on our own. Today I want to present some different documents under Eisendrache that give us a much clearer picture on the timeline it takes place in, the history leading up to it, and how the fractures themselves seem to work. So, in case you are new to the story, or have just forgotten, let's run down what a fracture actually is. Fractures are the words that Black Ops 3 and 4 uses to name some specific timelines. Timelines created by the killing of the 1.0 characters during its various maps. Essentially, to keep it short and sweet and not get bogged down in a ton of time travel, gobbly complicated words, we are sent to very explicit locations and times to kill each version of the original characters, for two purposes. One, to get their soul and place it in the summoning key. As each one is killed, the world is closed off and it prevents the infinite fractures that spawn from them, as we see in the Shadows of Evil scraps of paper, depicting the branching worlds, with some of them being closed off that Richtofen was targeting. Two, to kill them at these specific points so that they are removed from tons of alternate timelines at once. Killing these characters at these times essentially removes them from both the past and future, fracturing time. Thus, the name. For example, as Ultimus Richtofen is killed in The Giant, time freezes. Snow, the world ice starts pouring in. It then branches off into its own timeline, retroactively changing not just the future, but the past that shapes it. Each fracture gets a unique name so that we can identify them in discussion. So in this video, we are discussing the fracture that starts with killing Richtofen 1.0 and goes until we kill Dempsey 1.0 at the end of Der Eisendrache. So in essence, the fracture, the Giant, and Der Eisendrache take place in the Deceptio Fracture. We get a peek that time has seemingly changed from the comic book panel, illustrating the creation of this fracture, and a short section for it on the timeline. It says, Deceptio Fracture, 1940s, October 13th, 1945. The Giant. As a zombie outbreak occurs, Primus Dempsey, Takio, and Nikolai confront Ultimus Richtofen moments before he teleports Maxis and Samantha. As they try and reason with him to wake their counterparts and tell him not to open the teleporter, he ignores them. Primus Richtofen arrives through the teleporter and kills his Ultimus self that ends up triggering fractures across space and time. As Primus fights the undead, they send a beacon to Maxis, and he says that they must secure a future for the children. Meanwhile, Group 935 secure the Dempsey subject and transport him to Der Eisendrache. Primus secures them a German Giant. October 29th, 1945, Dr. Groff takes control of Group 935 in Richtofen's absence, not realizing his fate at the hands of Primus. October 31st, 1945, in the wake of haunted dreams and rumors that Samantha may be roaming Griffin Station, Groff worries that the MPD may be corrupting the facility. November 5th, the same year, 1945, Der Eisendrache takes place. Primus destroys Griffin Station and the moon and purges Group 935. Primus then recovers the Dempsey subject from a rocket bound for the moon. Richtofen then binds Primus and reveals to them his intentions to set things right by securing the soul of Ultimus Dempsey. Primus Dempsey says that he will do it, and Richtofen frees them, and Dempsey then turns off the life support, killing him as the soul of Ultimus Dempsey is contained. From the alternative Kino Der Toten loading screen that we receive in the comics, as well as the timeline entry, plus understanding how the fractures are created, we can take a few things from them. But the real meat of the discussion actually comes from the developer documents. And I think this is a shame because when we are presented with this image, it just seems like a mystery, a puzzle. I really don't think everyone can possibly interpret what they mean just from this alone. Now, some people see that as a plus. They like the mystery of the storyline, but to me, a mystery is only good if it's actually feasible to be put together. But luckily, I think the developer documents aid this in a way we would never be able to realize just on the game alone, which shouldn't be the way things are. In a document called DLC1 ZM Weekly Concept Projection, we can see developers requesting assets still necessary for the completion of the Eisendrache, as of course it was still being worked on at the time. The bit we want to discuss today is the bottom of the graphics page of the spreadsheet. We can see asset requests for the slideshow in Maxis's bedroom, which is now explicitly being confirmed as his slideshow. Why is this so important? The content of the images are things that should be things that Richtofen and not Maxis was aware of, particularly the presence of the MPD on the moon and its excavation. We also see Pablo Marinas' spleen, a skeleton being examined of a keeper, and all of this is so interesting. But like I said, we thought probably this was coming from the perspective of Richtofen. After all, Griffin Station on the moon was built by a subsect of Group 935 who were rebelling against Maxis' sellout to Germany by teaming up with Richtofen behind his back. Before, it could have been suggested these images were actually taken by Richtofen and were now being investigated by Maxis after his death. However, they are, or should I say were, some weird story inconsistencies that are now explained if we piece this together with what we know now about the fractures from the documents and what the timeline gives us about events. Two big question marks for the lore around the Eisendrache were Groff's comments about Germany's progress in the war, and why Maxis would live at a launching platform to the moonbase if he was meant to be unaware of its existence. Groff continuously spoke positively of war progress thanks to Group 935's advancements, which is odd considering that Germany should be losing the war by now, and Groff was against the sellout to the Germans anyways. It's why he allied with Richtofen in the original timeline. However, now, with our new findings, we can stitch it all together and make all of this make sense. Let's go back to the Giant, the moment Primus Richtofen shoots his 1.0 self. When Primus arrived here, for all intents and purposes, this was the Ultimus timeline. The exact events we see play out prior. Richtofen teleports Maxis and Sam, leading to them being killed.
Eagle's Nest, this is Griffin Station. We have an update. Over.
Dr. Groff, have you made any progress?
Yes, Doctor. The machine is ready and awaiting the conduit.
Very good. I will proceed with Operation Shield and join you shortly.
Security Protocol 935.
Yes. I will dispose of Dr. Maxis and that little brat personally. Do not touch anything.
What? Edward, what are you doing? Open the door! Edward, open this door now!
I'm scared.
Don't go! Stay by me, Samantha! Goodbye, Dr. Maxis.
However, this time Primus steps into play, and as we see in the Giant's cutscene, they stop Richtofen from finishing his plan to kill Maxis and Samantha. However, the moment that Primus Richtofen shoots him, the fracture is created, shattering history and the future around this event, as evidenced by the fact the timeline is the original timeline until breaking off to Deceptio here. This is where that comic panel comes into play and history shifts.
Only a fool would dare to change history.
The first major change, likely due to the presence of Primus, or just the sheer disheveled state of the multiverse at this point, history shifts so that Group 935 has access to far more 115 than ever before, in amounts much closer to Dimension 63's 115 deposits from the Great War.
In the beginning, and believe me, there was a beginning, everything was in its proper place. Time was linear, just as it should be. But a little thing called Element 115 changed all that. Especially when, what was it again? Oh, yes, when Group 935 came along. Once they started messing around with it, they buggered everything up. 115 shouldn't even exist in your dimension. But nonetheless, here we are. Bloody teleporters.
From this quote, we can see that the destruction of the multiverse, like these fractures, causes more Element 115 to be in dimensions in some cases. It seems the same happened here, which is why in the spawn room of the Giant we see a giant robot head. It's currently in production, not finished, however this was never seen in the original Der Riese. They clearly didn't progress as far. I'd argue that prior to the moment Richtofen was shot, that giant robot head was not outside, and it only appeared after history fractured, changing not just the present and future, but the past that shaped it. The other fracturing, judging by the comic book panel, is a lack of disaster at other 935 sites where they had once been. We see the plane landing, causing Nagda Untoten's outbreak to never happen. Vrucht and Shinonuma both calm and safe as well. The final panel is Richtofen shooting his 1.0 self, and the energy shooting back throughout the course of time to the very first panel, showing us this event caused these changes in history, changing the past, which is further expounded upon a bit in the documents. This, I believe, is a misinterpretation of how the fractures work in the zombies universe. When a fracture occurs, it's not just that you change the events from that current point moving forward to create a fracture. For example, if you save someone being rescued from being hit by a car, it would mean they would go on to live their life, changing the course of the future history. No, that's not how these fractures work. When the 1.0 versions are killed at very specific moments in time and history, it changes the past too. The whole dimension shatters and fractures. It's not just a regular dimension that exists within the multiverse where there's a potential infinite amount of possibilities. The universe is broken, bleeding, collapsing, falling apart. That is the breaking of the universe. There was already a multiverse established by the Keepers, using the summoning key and filling them with unique mixes of life before the fracturing of the universe caused by Ultimus Richtofen teleporting the Walnut for the first time. The fractures that the universe is breaking and breaking and breaking, as we see in the Shadows of Evil scraps of paper. When one fracture occurs, it splits into two, they just keep fracturing, splitting more and more and more, and it spirals out of control, which is why they have to kill themselves at specific moments to prevent them breaking and branching off in that way. But what exactly caused the better outcome for Group 935 at first would initially be hard to tell with what's shipped in the game. However, thanks to the way these assets from Maxis' slideshow are described, we can get a much better idea of what exactly changed.
Goodbye, Dr. Maxis.
The fracture of history seems to be that Richtofen's rebellion against Maxis was either substantially set back or basically never happened, and we see Maxis now taking many of the strides originally attributed to Richtofen in the original timeline. Essentially, Richtofen never established the 935 traitors group who would help him build the moon base, or at least was so substantially set back in doing so that the plan had not even begun by the time the MPD was discovered. We get further proof of this in some of the Eisendrache's dialogue, easier to understand with this new context.
Eagle's Nest, this is Griffin Station. We have an update. Over.
Dr. Grove, have you made any progress?
Yeah, Doctor. The machine is ready and awaiting the conduit.
Very good. I will proceed with Operation Shield and join you shortly.
Security Protocol 935.
No, actually. Maxis and his daughter have already been dealt with.
Would you care to explain exactly what you are doing in the company of our enemies? Richtofen? Richtofen! Richtofen! The security feeds are somewhat alarming. What on earth is going on down there?
Whoever this voice is, he seems unaware of current situation.
Dr. Grove, I have absolute confidence that the teleporter trials will prove successful. As such, you should not delay the project escalation based on your own petty fears.
Personal insults aside, Richtofen, I can assure you that the progress made at our lunar facility has only served to accelerate our plans. I have no doubt that the discovery of the MPD will prove vital to deciding the outcome of the war.
But Groff grows suspicious of Richtofen's change in personality and declares him an imposter.
Richtofen, whoever you may be, do not know your true intentions. But make no mistake, we will not allow you to succeed.
This is premise Richthofen being forced to play the part of the Richthofen they had just killed. However, the idea that this conversation is only now just happening reveals far more than initially shown. In essence, this conversation should have already taken place between Groff and Richthofen before he ever did what we saw in the Giant's cutscene. In the original quote, he promises to handle Maxis and Samantha himself and would then proceed to go through with his plan. This means that if Groff is only just now reaching out, the plans must have been substantially set back. Even more than simply Ultimus Richthofen just getting killed. These rebellious plans no longer manifesting would explain the other changes and inconsistencies we see. Without Richthofen's interference, the other facilities never fall into chaos, and with far larger amounts of Element 115, Maxis is able to construct the giant robots, not simply forced to use very small amounts of Element 115 to make teleporters and wonder weapon prototypes. With their facilities still functioning and far more weaponry that is also far more powerful, Group 935 would now prove a much more valuable asset to Germany in the war.
Group 935 has defied all those who doubted our cause. Since the discovery of Element 115, we have achieved so much. Our weapons program alone has advanced beyond even our wildest expectations. Furthermore, the fact that we have been able to establish a permanent base of operations on the moon itself leaves me filled with optimism for the future. We can literally do anything.
And Groff's support of them into Eisendrache isn't a weird character turn. It's because without Richthofen to lead the charge in his anti-Maxis group, they all simply got in line when 935 sold out to the Germans. And with the large amounts of success and extra funding they'd see, any concerns of politics would quickly go to the wayside. So this explains why Groff is both positive about Germany and talks of them like they are winning. They quite literally are. They are storming battlefields with 935 created weapons and giant robots. And currently, they have no technological equal.
Our allies in Division 9 have made great strides with their own research and development. Though I must confess to having had my own doubts regarding the feasibility of their more ambitious weapons designs. Successful field trials suggest that we may be able to deploy the specimen as early as this winter. Assuming progress remains on track, we may finally be able to break the stalemate on the Eastern Front.
This is probably why the dates between the Giant and the Eisendrache span 3 weeks, between October 13th and November 5th. This explains the weirdness surrounding the Eisendrache's intro cutscene, where we see Premise are in the giant robot chasing the Group 935 truck carrying the cryopod of 1.0 Dempsey. You would think if this was just the regular timeline that the whole world would be astonished by seeing this giant robot trundling across the countries. Well, it's because this was probably commonplace now in this fractured timeline. Technology had advanced. They had the giant robots like in Dimension 63 or the Gorod Krovi fracture. War was breaking out across the world and technology was a big part of it. This would have just seemed like another war scene on the battlefield. It probably also explains why it takes them 3 weeks, because it really shouldn't take them that long. They travel from Breslau, Germany to the Hohenwerfen Castle in Austria that the Eisendrache's based on. Upon searching online, Breslau is now Poland in the real world, but it's estimated to take just over 8 hours by car. Surely this giant robot would be a lot quicker by car. Well, I propose that maybe it took them so long because they were journeying along a war zone. This would have greatly reduced their speed of travel. Maybe they even had to swap out robots along the way. This far more powerful and successful Maxis, without Richthofen as a thorn in his side, is also able to establish the moon base himself. We know from his entries in the Black Ops 1 terminal, he was aware of Element 115 deposits on the moon, and was simply unable to retrieve them in the original timeline. But now, he takes over the Human Experimentation Division and finds the MPD himself, as shown by the slides of the test subjects and uncovering of the MPD in his room on the Eisendrache. And this is also why he managed to live at the Eisendrache, even though originally the moon base was hidden from him. This time, he owned it. Richtofen and Maxis' storylines essentially flipped. Who knows if he too touched the MPD and became corrupted by the Shadow Man. Anyways, with an extreme amount of funding and no need to hide transport from Maxis, materials could simply be sent to the moon via rockets from Eagle's Nest, a far safer and more reliable way than long-distance teleportation, as we see from plenty of other examples of people attempting to reach the moon.
Log entry 97, August 3rd, 1963. The matter transference device has been realigned. Again, in order to accommodate additional temporal variables. This is test number 11, human subject 5, one Private Hastings. If the transference specs are correct, Private Hastings will arrive at Griffin Station on August 3rd, 1963. If he arrives at this date, a communication link will be successfully established and we will have confirmed that the teleporter's temporal anomalies have been compensated for. Are you ready, Private Hastings?
Yes, sir.
I can't understand a word of what he's saying in that ridiculous spacesuit. A simple thumbs up will suffice, Private Hastings. Good. Initiate the transference matrix. Moment of truth. Dr. Richards, did it work? Do we have a stable connection?
No, sir. Nothing. We've lost him.
That's the 5th man we've lost. This base is rapidly running out of privates. Oh, I suppose they're all just dancing around on the moon somewhere in the far future, having a grand old time.
Maxis being in control of the test subjects also explains why Samantha Maxis was never put into the pyramid and instead the newest human test subject, Tank Dempsey, was selected. The iconic soul swap of Richtofen and Samantha would have never happened either. This also leads to the most major thematic flip, where the moon gets destroyed instead of the Earth. We know from the timeline that Groff and others believe the MPD was causing them to have visions of Samantha on the moon. However, it seems much more likely to me that she in fact was there. She was still teleported to the moon with her dog Fluffy, as Ultimus Richtofen trapped her in the teleporter, and as we hear in the Giant's intro, but due to the fracturing of time and shifting of events, she never ends up by the MPD, simply hiding in places around the moon base. Then Maxis, running the test subjects division, would order for one of them to be thrown in the MPD to run tests on what would happen, which is what they select Dempsey for. This pretty much answers every weird inconsistency in the Der Eisendrache lore I've ever really had, and also helps set up the history of the world for the future fractures. Once we kill Dempsey at the end of this map, the timeline shatters again, and history would again adjust as well as the future. However, the changes for the next fracture are actually based off of this one rather than the original timeline, explaining how history is so drastically different by the time we reach Gorod Krovi. This is where the war never ends, and it essentially boils down to a battle between robots of Germany and Russia. And I explain this more in a video going into more detail on the backstory of Reznov and his connections to the Gorod Krovi fracture that we'll have linked on screen or in the description. However, I will be covering all of the other fractures as they are worth other videos on their own, so if you guys want me to keep making videos on them, let me know in the comments and we can learn about them from the leaked documents and we can try and attempt Zetsubo no Shima next. I hope you are loving all of the Return to Black Ops 3 videos. It feels so good going back to the game that shaped the channel and really took it off, and there is still so much left to discuss surrounding this game. And I'm so glad that the community is still buzzing about this game even all of these years later. It's really the gem that keeps on giving, and I think we will still be discovering new things for years, maybe even decades to come. Especially considering we're almost a decade since it released now, and there's still so much being found. But anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for the latest and greatest Call of Duty news information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.